This episode of the Rocker Skating Podcast is brought to you by Aura. Let's be honest, breaking in new skates is kind of the worst, right? Blisters, sore ankles, the whole deal. Aura is here to make that way easier. Their skates are built with a one-piece carbon fiber shell that you can heat mold to your foot, so they fit you and not the other way around. And Aura skates have an integrated collar system, which basically means your boot bends with you while giving you the support that you need. Translation: more skating, less complaining. Visit auraskates.com to learn more. Welcome to the Rocker Skating Podcast, sponsored by John Wilson Blades. It's been a thrilling day of figure skating. The team event just finished, and Team USA was the winner by just a point over Team Japan. And then in another thrilling race, it was a historic medal for Team Italy, the home team, winning bronze over Georgia, and it was Team Canada who finished in fifth. I mean, there was so much that went on over the past 3 days, and what I will say is, and a lot of people around me who I talk to agree that in the 4 years that the Olympic team event has happened, this was probably the best one. I mean, the fact that there were so many just incredibly good skates, and so many people who skated their hearts out. And, it wasn't just that, it was the atmosphere was amazing. I think some of these skaters had, their last Olympic experience was COVID Olympics in Beijing. And, I know mine was, and just remembering that it was so generally quiet in that arena, with the exception of the athletes cheering for each other. And frankly, it was hard to cheer because everybody was wearing masks. It really was such a difference to be in this arena, and it was loud. The music was loud. The crowd was loud. The skaters were loud. I mean, it was incredible skating. It was an incredible atmosphere. And as you saw today, it came down to the wire. It wasn't, there were there were three things, right? One was that it was great skating. Two was that the crowd was great. Three, there was some intrigue involved in how all of this happened. And it was amazing to watch. Let me go through. Forgive me if you have gone and listened and watched the last couple of days of Rocker Pod recap shows, but I'm gonna just talk about some of the highlights over the past few days. And we started with a day where we didn't know what to really expect, right? Like when day one started, there were a lot of unknowns. There was a lot of like, okay, well, who's going to get where, and how do you as a medal favorite or a gold medal favorite, or just like trying to figure out whether or not you could even make it into the team final, all of that, right? Um, how was that going to manifest itself? And we started off with a bang, and it was the rhythm dance. And as you all know right now, it is 1 a.m. in Milan, and the rhythm dance is going to be starting in a matter of 18 hours. And so I sure hope the ice dancers have calmed down from their nights, and are able to actually go and get a little bit of rest before tomorrow morning. Um, but the rhythm dance started it all, and one of the things that we came into this competition wondering was not just whether Laurence Fournier-Beaudry and Guillaume Cicerone were going to compete in the team event, right? Because Papadakis Cicerone did not compete in the team event when they had the opportunity to 8 years ago in Pyeongchang, and they chose to. And it also means that they chose to go head to head with Madison Chalk and Evan Bates. And it could go one or two ways, right? Or one of two ways. One is that they win and they carry some momentum into the individual event. The other is that Chalk and Bates wins and they continue their momentum from the Grand Prix final. And what happened here was very similar to what happened in the Grand Prix final, where Chalk and Bates beat Fournier, Beaudry, and Cicerone by about a point. And if we remember the rhythm dance, the very interesting thing about that was that you actually saw a little bit of um, maybe a little bit of just nerves or hesitation from Guillaume Cicerone, especially when during that rhythm dance, and so they weren't as big and assertive as they tend to be, especially with him, and so you saw that, and you saw that in the component scores, and one thing to that I always look for in these events is how the component scores stack up against each other. Yes, there's the total score, right? But there's also just the fact that the components get, they give you a sense of what might happen in the individual events because that's how the judges are sort of perceiving these teams right now. And you look at the top five. And by the way, the top five in the rhythm dance here at in the team event are going to be likely the top five who are fighting for the medals, and so it was an embarrassment of riches to start the team event with this level of competition. And you look at those component scores, Chalk and Bates beat Fournier, Beaudry, and Cicerone by 0.05. And that did not happen. I don't believe that happened at the Grand Prix final in the rhythm dance. And for me, the rhythm dance for Chalk and Bates is actually the weaker of the two programs. I genuinely see their free dance as a bigger program, as a more interesting and intricate program than their rhythm dance, and this says a lot, right? For how this all could manifest itself. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance to, the ice dance preview has dropped on the podcast, and I will actually end up streaming that tomorrow for YouTube viewers if you're interested in it. But the ice dance preview that Michelle and I did are on or is on the podcast channels. But then you take a look at the rest of them, right? Fear Gibson, Gilles Poirier, Guignard Fabry. And the thing that was most interesting to me is that Gilles Poirier, despite losing the rhythm dance here to Fear and Gibson, were scored higher in their component marks. And so that gives me a signal that, especially for Gilles Poirier fans who have been sort of mourning the potential loss of a podium finish, I don't think all hope is lost there. And so watch that space tomorrow, especially. These components and the grades of execution are going to be very important here. And so we finished the rest of the day one with some very interesting things, right? Chalk and Bates winning the rhythm dance was already a boon to the U.S. Chances for gold. Then you got the pairs short program where Wenjing Sui and Song Han did not skate very well. She had actually a really bad fall on the throw triple flip, and it was a little concerning. We've seen those kinds of falls this season, and we've seen some dislocation of shoulders that have happened with those kinds of falls. And that was something, that a lot of us sort of had a bit of a "is she okay" kind of thing. If her shoulder had been, more like some of the other pair girls' shoulders, that might have been a dislocation right there because that was one of those really just like really jarring falls. But that is to say, Sway and Han having those mistakes meant that Cam and O'Shea finished ahead of them. And that was a result that was not expected. And that gave the US a bit of a boost going into then the next event and the next day. And lo and behold, today in the third day, Cam and O'Shea skated probably the best free skate of their life. And they again exceeded expectations here. And so if you think about MVP, right? Everybody came in here with a kind of an expectation of where they would be um, in the standings. And really, if you look at Cam and O'Shea versus everybody else here, you probably expected them to be fifth, sixth, or seventh in the short program, and you expected them to be fourth or fifth in the free skate. And they ended up in the higher end of both of those, right? They got fifth in the short program and then fourth in the free skate. And it was really like that. Those were two very clutch, both performances and placements. And the fact that today, I'm skipping between time here, but today during day 3, when we had the pairs free skate, the pairs free skate was amazingly well skated, to the surprise of all of us who have been watching pairs and sort of been like, oh my God, what's going to happen? The fact that Cam and O'Shea went out there as the first team, skated the free skate of their life, and then ended up being in fourth, and frankly, there was an argument there for them ending up in third. Was a real advantage for the U.S. Let's put it this way: had Cam and O'Shea been sixth in the short and fifth in the free, the U.S. would have lost to Japan. Simple as that. It was that close, right? Every little placement counts. So the short programs were the pair short programs were what they expected to be, with the exception of what happened with Sui and Han. And then in the women's short program, that was where Kaori Sakamoto was expected to be in first, and Alyssa Liu was expected to be in second. There was a chance that they could have flip-flopped, but the likelihood was that Kaori would have won. But the thing that helped Team Italy was Lara Naki-Gutman getting third in the women's short program. That was probably one or maybe even two places higher than what she was probably expected to be doing, given how all of the skaters have been skating this season. Um, there was a potential that she goes below Anastasia Kubanova. There was a potential that she goes below Jia Shin, and Jia Shin actually skated well here. So Italy's chances to get on the podium had a huge boost because of what Lara Naki-Gutman did on that first day. And Sarakanti acknowledged that, right? She in the press conference on the first day, she said, Lara was a star, and there was a lot to be happy about because of that placement. So that was the first day. Second day was interesting because we had the men's short program. And the men's short program was expected to be Ilia first and Yuma second. And it ended up being Yuma first and Ilia second. And therefore, the dynamic between the US and Japan immediately shifted. Yuma Kageyama had one of the best short programs of his life. Ilia Malinin had 2 mistakes, and they both added up to probably a good 10 points, maybe 12 points, right? And that ended up putting him in 2nd place, and just that switch meant that it was a 2-point differential that the US was giving up, because you lose 1 point, right, for not getting the placement, right, and then you lose another point, quote unquote, because you are now behind the team that you were supposed to be ahead of. So yes, you get 10 points or 9 points instead of 10 points, but because you are up head to head against the one who's getting the 10 points, right, you actually lose, frankly, 2 points. Math is all over the place, but that's how it works. Then, right, there were a couple of very interesting things that also happened that changed the dynamics of some of the other things that were going on. Steven Gogolev gets 3rd for Team Canada. That pushed Team Canada into not just into the free skate, but also into the free skate in contention for a medal. We came in knowing that Italy and Georgia were likely going to be the ones who would be fighting for the bronze. But then, right, Canada has this great skate, 2 great skates, really. One from Pierre Michaud, who were 4th in the short program, and then one from um, Steven Gogolev, who was 3rd in the short program. So they were none of the Canadian entries were winning anything or even 2nd, right? But they were all very steadily 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, kind of that area. And so that carried them into the free skate in a very good position. Um, Go, uh, Gogolev needed to be above Kevin Amos. And I think Kevin Amos needed to beat Gogolev by 2 places, right? There has to be somebody in between them in order for France to get into the free skate, and Gogolev just skated incredibly well, and Kevin Amos had a couple of shaky jumps that kept him from really scoring to his maximum potential, which is usually kind of in the mid 90s, right? If he skates a clean 1 quad short program, and that was sort of the death knell for Team France's chances at the at in the free skate. But then a couple other things also. Then, if you looked at the short programs, right? Georgia dug themselves into a hole. They talk about kind of expectations, right? Metelkina Barulova were expected to be 1st or 2nd. They got 2nd, so that was fine. Diana Davis and Gleb Smokin were expected to be 6th, right? 6th, and they got 6th. So those turned out more or less what they thought it would turn out as. Now, Anastasia Gubanova was expected to be sort of in that 3rd or 4th, and she got 4th. So she was lower than sort of what folks would expect her to be. And then Nika Gatze, a European champion, ended up 6th. And so, there were a couple of things where Team Georgia didn't perform to what they potentially were expecting, right? And so that ended up going to the free skate, right? We talk about how the short programs can't win you anything, but they could potentially lose you something. And those short programs, they dug themselves into a hole while Italy was overperforming what they were expected to do. And so that set the stage for the free skates and what we saw happen today. So then free skate, the short programs happen and the free skates start. And it was again, right, Chalk and Bates. They had to do the free dance because there was just no other way that, if you were Team USA, if you put in Zyngas Kolesnik, they probably would have been 2nd, maybe even 3rd, depending on how they skated and how the judges were, right? Guignard Fabry had a 124. LaJoie Lega had a 120, and Zengiz Kolesnik is in that kind of 120 range, and so it could have been a second or a third. That would have spelled a lot of trouble for the U.S. team. Um, and so, having Chuck and Bates there not only allowed the U.S. to comfortably win the free dance, but it also allowed Chuck and Bates to put up a 133 in that free dance. Makes a big difference in both what happened in the team event and also what will happen in potentially will happen in the individual event. So that free dance, right, set the U.S. up with a 5-point lead going into the final day of competition. And people looked at that 5-point lead and they were like, oh, that's not the kind of lead that you would want to have if you were the US, because you knew that they were going to basically give up a good chunk of that lead in the pairs free skate. And then you look at the women's free skate and you're like, okay, Kaori Sakamoto's there again. And so, how does that work? And then you look at the men's free skate, Ilia had to be in there. I've been saying this since January when people were asking me, like, who would you have at the team event? I'm like, you can't put anyone except for Ilia in both, and Maddie and Evan in both, and Karen O'Shea in both, and then have potentially the Alyssa Amber switcheroo, right? Because uh, they th- that's they are somewhat interchangeable in the ceilings of how well they can score, and so that's exactly what happened, and it turned out they needed every little point of those skates, and so we started off today believing that the likelihood was that Miura Kihara would win and that Cameron O'Shea would be in fifth. There were always going to be scenarios where Cameron O'Shea gets fourth over Parami Show. There were also scenarios where Cameron O'Shea could have been higher. There are also scenarios where also Miura Kihara could have not skated as well and then lost to Metelkina Barulova, but the likelihood was that it was going to be first for Miura Kihara and fifth for Cameron O'Shea based on how they have been recently skating. But then Cameron O'Shea comes in and takes it by the horns and just, I mean, the guts to be able to put that kind of program out there, knowing what they knew, which was, yeah, we can finish fifth, but if we finished fourth or higher, we would really give Team USA a bit of a cushion. And again, it turned out they needed the cushion because of what happened in the women's free skate. But just looking at what happened with Cam and O'Shea in the short program, where they exceeded expectations, and in the free skate where they exceeded expectations, they were the MVPs, really. I mean, if it hadn't been for them exceeding expectations, the U.S. would not have won the gold here. So that was a big thing. And again, was there an argument that they should have been third instead of fourth? Yeah, there was an argument for that. Sarakanti Nikumachi weren't tentative. They skated well. But the side by side combo was where they lost a whole bunch of points, and if I think had this not been at an Italian Olympics, and had the crowd maybe not be as uproarious about that skate, the skate that Cam and O'Shea had could have very well overtaken Kantimachi. Either way, right? It was very close, and that's how it ended up being. And And so, you know, you then went to the next event, which was the women's free skate, with the U.S. not having a 1 point lead as most people expected, but with a 2 point lead, and so there was cushion. And so everybody under the sun was like, well, what would happen if there's a tie at the end? Because there was the very much the scenario where Kaori gets first, Amber gets second, right? And then Ilia gets second, and Yuma, or not Yuma, Shun gets first, and therefore it leads to a tie. And in that scenario, that tie would have meant that Japan would have won because they would have won all the tie. They would have won the second tiebreak, which was the one after uh, the first tiebreak, which is the top two placements of each team, right? Both teams had two first place placements, and so then that kept the tie, and then the next was the the total segment scores across the two highest placements. And because Japan had a bunch of first place placements, and they had first place placements in two of the free skates, right? It just automatically meant that they were going to win the tiebreak. Ask me again another time what that actually all means, but that's how it would have worked. But so, I think we expected the women to be at a point where Kaori wins, Amber was second, right? And then some combination of Gubanova or and Larranaки Gutman would have been third or fourth. But Anastasia Gubanova skated an incredibly good free skate, one of the best that she has ever skated. And she puts up a 140, which is a big, big score, right? 140 is not for the faint of heart. And so she puts up that score. Larranaки Goodman could not match the score. She actually skated very well at the beginning of the program and then fizzled out in the second half. It was like the exact opposite of what happened at Europeans, where she was tentative in the first half and skated a very strong second half. And so hopefully this gives her a renewed kind of motivation to go and skate a clean program in the individual women's event. But Amber Glenn, right, came in as the second to last skater, more or less knowing what she had to do, right? She had to beat a 140. That's not an easy task. And she goes and has two shaky jumps to start. A hanging on to a cleanly rotated triple axel, but then kind of going back to what happened earlier in the season where she was having trouble with the triple flip, triple toe combination. She steps out of the triple flip, does not do a triple toe. So that's already grades of execution. And then on top of that, you got base value issues. And so she had to scramble. And the Amber of old could have let that really mess with her head. Let's not discount the fact that she came back and she skated the rest of the program cleanly, right? She went and did everything that she needed to do, and she had the state of mind to add the third combo in there because she missed the combo at the beginning of the program. It wasn't a triple toe, but at least it was a double toe. It gave her a couple more points back. And, you look at how she skated there, and it's actually kind of a good thing that she skated the second half cleanly, because the final triple loop has been the thing that has given her trouble. She's either under rotated it or had issues with it over the past few competitions. And so that, right, I think she should bring some good stuff out of that program to the individual event. Um, one, the fact that she started off a little bit nervy and settled in and actually finished the program strongly. And then two, that she proved to herself that she could do a clean second half, which has been the problem this season. Nevertheless, that once she stepped out of the triple toe, it was going to be very hard for her to get ahead of a 140 scoring Gubanova. And so that was the US was then behind the eight ball. It went back to the original scenario where Cam and O'Shea finished fifth and Amber Glenn finished second, right? It's basically the opposite. Cam and O'Shea finished fourth, Amber Glenn finished third, and the differential meant that we were going into the final the final event with a tie between Team USA and um, Team Japan. In addition to that, Gubanova's skate and the fact that she beat Laranaki Gutman by 2 places meant that Georgia was digging themselves out of the hole that they put themselves in the short program. And it meant also then that Georgia was back in the conversation for the bronze medal. And so we went into the free skate with these scenarios in mind. One was if US beats Japan in the men's free skate, US wins. If Japan beats the US in the men's free skate, Japan wins. Very simple, very simple. And then for the fight for bronze, it was if Georgia beat Italy by 2 places or more, Georgia wins, because had they been tied, Georgia would have had the tiebreaker because they had stronger individual events, right? Italy had more of a strong all-around event, and that was what we came in with for the free skate for the men. Nika Gatse started us off, and you can tell, even in the warm-up, you can tell he was nervy. You can tell he knew that the medal was within reach. And once the pop on the quad lutz happened right at the beginning of the program, it was basically kind of downhill. And he never really got his footing in that free skate. And, for him to have done a free skate like he did at Europeans, that would have been the ideal, right? But that's sort of what we started off with, right? Was with Nika Gatse's nervy skate, and then all that needed to happen at that point was Matteo Rizzo, who skated after Nika Gatse, just had to beat a 154, which was very much within reach, especially given how he skated at Europeans. But oh my God, Matteo Rizzo not only skated to beat the 154 that he was shooting for, he skated one of the best free skates of his life. And he goes and almost gets a 180. I mean, I don't know about you, but I watched that program and it was thrilling. It was so good. And he just performed the heck out of that program. He got everybody out of their seats. Italy was losing their minds in the box. I mean, it was such the moment. It's what the team event is made for. This kind of moment where you knew things were needed to happen, and everybody knew things needed to happen, and it happened. And he skated so well, and he knew when he landed whatever that last jump was, a loop or a flip or something, whatever he landed that last jump was, he knew that he had clinched the bronze for Italy. And again, Italy came in as an underdog. for the bronze medal. Georgia really was the one who, again, if you looked at um, recent results and the scoring potential, right? You really thought that Georgia had on paper an edge over Italy. And Italy needed to overperform. And again, they overperformed. And Matteo Rizzo, there was no dry eye in the house. Count that as the first time I cried in the Asago Forum, and it won't be the last. I am quite sure about that one. But it was so heartwarming to see, and um, they get the bronze medal. They didn't even have to do anything else because they had no chance for any other medal. But they got the bronze, which was their goal, and it was a historic one for Team Italy. They get their first medal in the team event at the Olympics. And so Steven Gogolev goes. He skated a decent program, not his best, maybe a little bit tentative, but he continues to have a great Olympic debut. But then you got the last two. And the last two was exactly that scenario that I was talking about, right? You either, whoever wins their team the gold medal. And obviously there was all the stuff that went before it, right? That set the stage for all of that. And I will keep saying, right? Had it not been Cam and O'Shea doing the heroics in both the short and the free, Team USA's chances would not have been there for the gold medal. And so Ilia went out there knowing that he needed to win. He knew that that was something that was very much within his reach. And he went out there and skated a more conservative program because he knew that a more conservative program and clean would get him there. So no quad axle, no quad loop. He does those are the two quads that were most likely to have the mistake. And it was fine. He was skating well up until his second quad Lutz. And it did a very similar thing to what he had in the short program, where he went up a little bit too kind of lofty and he didn't rotate and get the snap as much as he did or could have. And it was a little bit under. I think he got a Q for this one. He got an under for the one in the short. It was more rotated than the one in the short. But he put his hand down, stepped out of it, no combo. That also meant, right, Ilia has a risky free skate, not just in the fact that there's a bunch of quads, but he has a risky free skate because he backloads all three combos. And so if you mess up a combo, there is no chance for you to recover and do another combo. And so that's exactly what happened, right? He lost, oh gosh, 20 points, 15, 20 points because he made the mistake and he didn't have the combo. And so, you know, then you looked at the rest of it. He went and actually, instead of doing quad toe, triple toe, he did quad toe, half loop, triple flip. That turned out to be a huge key to his win because that gave him an extra 2.5 points of base value because it was a flip and not a toe. And it was a flip and not a toe with a bonus. So it was fast thinking on his part, and he goes and finishes up with, his trademark quad sow triple axle combination. It was great. He still performed the heck out of that program. And I think he is certainly feeling the nerves more than I think a lot of people thought he would. And you saw it in the short. You saw it in just that one moment in the free skate with that quad Lutz, where he kind of was like, okay, maybe he actually thought about it a little bit and it played with his head. So we'll see how he brings this into the free skate or into the individual events, which will happen later this week, crazily enough. And the all of that, made such a difference because that extra base value was really critical. So he goes in he goes and gets a 200, right? 200.03, I think. And Shun Sato knows exactly what he needs to do, which was to beat Ilia Malinina's 200 points. And Shun Sato has never gotten over 200 points in international competition before. And so there was, in my mind, the question of, is he going to risk the extra base value and put in the quad flip? Because he did a quad flip in the practice this morning, and he did a quad flip in the warm up. And I was like, what are like, what? Why are you doing a quad flip in the warm up if you're not going to do it in the free skate? And it was very interesting. I do wonder if they had talked over it and decided that the quad flip was too risky. One, because he hasn't been doing the run through with the quad flip, at least here in Milan. And two, his quad flip has historically gotten an edge call, which means that even if he landed a clean quad flip with the edge call, it would have meant a good bit lower number of points that he could have gotten. And so the they went with the safer option, the one that he knew he could go clean with, and he went clean with it. But the problem was he got a little too excited. The step sequence was very hoppy, and there were a couple times where he almost tripped. And it was sort of the excitement of the moment, right? It happened after he landed everything cleanly, and the dreaded step sequence 2 came on the board. And once that came on the board, I was like, this is probably going to end up going to the levels. Same thing with his final combination spin. He was too amped up at that point, and he lost both levels and positions. He got a V on it because I think it was, I think he didn't get his sit position. I have to go back and look, but I took a look at that and I was like, oh yeah, there was no way this was going to get not just a 4, right? But it was definitely going to get a V. And so all of those things added up, and it added up, and it added up, and the base value that Shun had went down probably 3.5 points or so. So he's not known to be the best at getting levels for his spins, but he always gets some kind of level for his step sequence. I mean, I was looking at the Grand Prix final. At the Grand Prix final, he got that, and that was what I was comparing it against. At the Grand Prix final, he was level 4 and everything. And so that took away a lot of the potential, right, for him to match Ilia's 200. And so all of that, it was unfortunate that it came down to a lot of those little things and the levels and the precision of how he skated the program while he was amped up and excited. But that made a huge difference. It didn't make all the difference. He still would have probably been like a 198 or 199. So that's how it went. Nevertheless, he goes into the men's event having skated this program on Olympic ice as his debut. He's got to feel good about that. And again, you wonder if now it's planted in his mind that maybe it's time for the quad flip to come in because he can get into the 200s, and we'll see how that edge goes. So there you have it. somehow I have figured out how to talk about the entire 3 days. Um, Ends up with Team USA winning their second consecutive gold medal, Team Japan winning their second consecutive silver medal, and then Italy getting their first medal, a bronze. So, whew, that was that was quite the start to this Olympic Games. We still have a week and a half of skating left, and more than that. Um, so if this is how we start the Olympics, I sure hope we're going to get more of what happened over the past few days. Now, one thing that I do have to report is that the skaters were telling me that the podium were messing with their blades. So I don't know what's going to happen, especially with the ice dancers tomorrow going to the rhythm dance. So it's Chalk and Bates, Guignard Fabry, it's those two, right? Because Yoshida and Morita are not in the individual events. So everybody else sort of has a little bit extra time to both sharpen their blades and get used to them. These two are going to need to get their blades sharpened and get a feel for it in the practice session tomorrow and go and compete. So hopefully this doesn't make too much of a difference. Hopefully it doesn't make any difference at all to how they skate in the rhythm dance, but it is something to watch out for tomorrow. What was interesting was when I was seeing them the Team Italy go to the podium, I think it was Nico Machi, feeling the surface of the podium, and I was like, "Oh, interesting." Like, is he just like seeing what it is? And it turned out he was feeling it because it was like it might not actually be good for the blades. And I don't know what it's made of, but usually these podiums is a rubber surface, right? Much like what people walk on. And even rubber surfaces, people don't love to walk on it with bare blades because they do have a tendency to dull out the blades the more you walk on those rubber surfaces. So that was a little bit concerning, seeing them feel what that material was. I still don't know what it is. It couldn't have been metal because it's like you just can't stand metal on metal and not, you know, have the risk of slipping, but I'll have to investigate further tomorrow. Anyway, that's it for this edition of the Rocker Skating Podcast. Thank you for joining me. We will get into the rhythm dance tomorrow and excited to get the individual events started. This is Jackie Wong, Chief Skate Nerd of RockerSkating.com. Thanks as always to our friends at John Wilson Blades. And by the way, I had dinner with the CEO of John Wilson Blades the other day, and he was showing me blades that were made for royalty back in like 300 years ago, and they were very cool. They looked like swans. Maybe it wasn't 300 years ago. I don't know. It was a while ago. Thank you also to Tara Nichols, who joined me yesterday for a recap of day 2, and hopefully she will join me for more of these recaps, as well as making me sound good, because I kind of have to be sounding good here. And we'll talk to you again soon. I hope you have a great night's sleep. Good night.